The rain hit Seattle like a confession, relentless and raw, soaking through my sneakers as I stood outside Retro Threads, the vintage shop where I'd agreed to meet him. My heart was a fist, pounding against my ribs, because today was the day I'd either win Ethan Caldwell or lose him forever. I'd been pretending for weeks, molding myself into the sensitive, poetic soul he seemed to crave, but I was just a boy in love, terrified of the truth. I'd first seen Ethan 3 months ago at a Capitol Hill open mic, his voice cutting through the smoky haze like a blade. He read poetry about heartbreak and identity, his words sharp enough to make the room ache. I was just another face in the crowd, a 22-year-old barista named Lucas Harper, too shy to approach but too smitten to forget. Ethan, 25, was everything I wasn't. Confident, articulate, with cheekbones that could start a riot and eyes that held secrets I wanted to unravel. He was openly gay, unapologetic, a beacon in Seattle's vibrant queer scene. Me? I was still figuring out how to say, "I'm bi," without tripping over the words. That night, I'd lingered by the stage, clutching my coffee like a lifeline, until he noticed me. "You look like you've got a poem in you," he said, smirking. I mumbled something incoherent, but he laughed, a sound that hooked me like a fish on a line. We started talking, then texting, then meeting up at bookstores and record shops. Ethan loved sensitive types, the ones who cried at sad movies and quoted Rilke. So I played the part. I memorized poetry, faked tears during Call Me By Your Name, and nodded thoughtfully when he ranted about toxic masculinity. But every lie I told felt like a brick in a wall between us, and I knew it couldn't hold forever. Today was different. Ethan had invited me to shop for outfits for the Pride Festival, a chance to be close to him in a way that felt dangerously intimate. Retro Threads was his favorite spot, a maze of velvet jackets and sequined vests where he felt alive. I pushed open the door, the bell jingling like a warning. Ethan was already there, rifling through a rack of scarves, his auburn hair catching the light. "Lucas," he called, waving me over. "You're late. Got lost in your feelings again." I forced a laugh, my stomach twisting. "Just the rain," I said, shaking water from my jacket. Up close, he smelled like cedar and ambition, and I wanted to tell him everything. How I wasn't the soft poet he thought. How I'd grown up in a small Oregon town where sensitive was a dirty word. How I'd fallen for him so hard it hurt. But I swallowed it down like always. We wandered the store, Ethan holding up shirts and jackets, his fingers brushing mine when he passed me a denim vest. "Try this," he said, his eyes lingering on me a second too long. My pulse spiked. Was he flirting? Or was I reading too much into it? I'd spent weeks analyzing every glance, every text, building a fragile castle of hope. But hope was a dangerous thing when you were lying about who you were. The fitting room was a tiny, mirrored box at the back of the store, its velvet curtain barely separating us from the world. Ethan insisted we share it, saying it'd be faster. My heart was a drum roll as we stepped inside. The space, so small our elbows bumped. He stripped off his sweater, revealing a lean torso and a tattoo of a crescent moon on his collarbone. I tried not to stare, focusing instead on the vest, fumbling with the buttons like an idiot. "You okay?" Ethan asked, his voice softer now, almost concerned. He was trying on a silk shirt, the fabric clinging to his shoulders. I nodded, my throat tight. This was my chance. Say something real, stop pretending. But then he turned, catching my reflection in the mirror, and his smile faltered. "You're quiet today," he said. "What's going on in that head of yours?" I froze. The truth was a wildfire, burning through my carefully crafted facade. I wanted to tell him I wasn't the sensitive guy he thought, that I'd been faking it to get close to him, that I loved him in a way that scared me senseless. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I mumbled, "Just thinking about Pride." "You excited?" He tilted his head, studying me like I was a poem he couldn't quite decipher. "Yeah," he said slowly. "But it's more than that for me. It's about being real, you know? No masks." His words hit like a punch. No masks. I was drowning in them. The rest of the shopping trip was a blur. Ethan bought a scarf and a pair of boots. I got the vest, mostly because he liked it. We stepped back into the rain, and he suggested coffee at a nearby cafe. As we walked, his shoulder brushed mine, and I wondered how long I could keep this up, pretending, hiding, hoping he'd love me back before the truth tore us apart. At the cafe, we sat by the window, steam rising from our mugs. Ethan talked about pride, about the community he'd found, the battles he'd fought to be himself. I used to hide who I was, he said, stirring his latte. High school was brutal, but I promised myself I'd never do that again. You ever feel like you're hiding, Lucas? My breath caught. He didn't know. He couldn't. But his question felt like a spotlight. I sipped my coffee, stalling. Sometimes, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. It's hard to figure out who you're supposed to be. He nodded, his eyes warm but piercing. You'll get there, he said. Just don't let anyone else write your story. I wanted to scream that he was my story, that every lie I'd told was for him. But I just smiled, weak and false, and changed the subject. That night, alone in my tiny apartment, I stared at the vest hanging on my chair. Pride was in 2 days, and I had a choice. Keep pretending or risk everything. The truth was a blade, sharp and terrifying, but I couldn't shake Ethan's words. No masks. I didn't know if I was brave enough to take mine off, but I knew I couldn't keep it on much longer. Not if I wanted him, not if I wanted to be free. The morning of Pride dawned bright, the Seattle sky a rare, cloudless blue that felt like a dare. I stood in my bathroom, staring at my reflection, the denim vest Ethan picked out mocking me from the counter. Today was the day I'd either confess or crumble, and my nerves were a live wire, sparking with every thought of him. I'd spent the last 2 days spiraling, replaying our cafe conversation, his words about hiding slicing deeper each time. Ethan didn't just want authenticity. He demanded it, lived it, breathed it. And here I was, Lucas Harper, small-town fraud, pretending to be someone I wasn't just to hold his attention. The irony was I was sensitive, deep down, but not the way he thought. My sensitivity wasn't in poetry or tearjerker movies. It was in the way my heart raced when he smiled, the way I'd memorized the curve of his jaw, the way I'd built my whole world around him without ever saying it. Pride was chaos and color, a sea of rainbow flags and glitter-dusted faces flooding Capitol Hill. I found Ethan near the parade route, his outfit a masterpiece of defiance. A sheer crop top, leather pants, and the scarf we'd bought together tied around his neck. He looked like he belonged, like the crowd parted just for him. Lucas, he shouted, pulling me into a hug that stole my breath. You made it. Barely, I said, trying to match his energy. My vest felt like a costume, too stiff, too new. Around us, music pulsed, and drag queens strutted past, their heels clicking like gunfire. Ethan grabbed my hand, pulling me toward a float blasting pop anthems. Dance with me, he said, already moving, his body fluid and fearless. I stumbled along, my movements awkward, my mind screaming, tell him now. But I didn't. Instead, I danced, laughed, let myself get swept up in the moment. For a few hours, I wasn't the liar or the coward. I was just a boy next to the boy he loved, the world loud and bright around us. Ethan's hand brushed mine again, intentional this time, and when our eyes met, I saw something flicker in his gaze, curiosity, maybe, or something deeper. It gave me hope, dangerous and sharp. After the parade, we wandered to a quieter street, the air thick with the smell of fried food and freedom. Ethan leaned against a brick wall, catching his breath, his crop top riding up to reveal a sliver of skin. This is what it's about, he said, gesturing at the fading crowd. Being who you are, no apologies. You feel it, Lucas? I nodded, but my chest ached. I want to, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. He raised an eyebrow, waiting. I could have told him then, about the lies, the love, the fear, but a group of his friends appeared, shouting his name, and the moment shattered. They were loud, colorful, all piercings and dyed hair, and I felt like an outsider, my small-town roots showing through my carefully curated facade. One of them, a girl named Zara with a buzz cut and a septum piercing, eyed me curiously. You're the poet, right? She asked, smirking. Ethan says you're all deep and soulful. My face burned. Ethan had talked about me, but he'd talked about the fake me, the one I'd invented. Something like that. I mumbled, avoiding Ethan's gaze. He laughed, slinging an arm around me, oblivious to the panic clawing at my throat. Let's hit the after party, he said, pulling me along. The party was in a loft downtown, all exposed brick and pulsing lights. Ethan knew everyone, flitting from group to group like a firefly. I clung to the edges, nursing a soda, watching him shine. Every time he glanced my way, I felt the weight of my deception grow heavier. I wasn't soulful. I wasn't poetic. I was just a boy who'd fallen too hard, too fast. Then it happened. Zara, tipsy and bold, cornered me by the bar. So, Lucas, she said, her voice teasing, recite one of your poems for me. The room seemed to quiet, or maybe that was just my pulse drowning everything else out. Ethan was nearby, watching, his smile expectant. I froze, my mind blank. I'd memorized a few lines of Neruda for moments like this, but under her gaze, they felt like ash in my mouth. I don't have anything ready, I stammered. Zara's smirk widened, and Ethan's brow furrowed. Come on, she pressed. Ethan's been hyping you up. Give us something. I wanted to disappear. My lies were unraveling, thread by thread, and Ethan was watching, his expression shifting from curiosity to doubt. I mumbled an excuse and slipped outside, the cool night air a slap to my face. I leaned against the building, breathing hard, cursing myself. I'd built this trap, and now I was caught. Ethan found me minutes later, his silhouette sharp against the neon glow. What was that about? He asked, his voice gentle but edged with something I couldn't name. You've been weird all day. I'm fine. I lied, but my voice cracked. He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine, and I felt the truth rising like a tide. I couldn't keep pretending, not here, not with him. But before I could speak, he touched my arm, his fingers warm and steady. Lucas, he said softly, whatever it is, you can tell me. And in that moment, with the city humming around us and his hand on my arm, I almost believed I could. The loft's neon glow spilled onto the street, painting Ethan's face in shades of pink and blue as he waited for me to speak. My confession was a boulder in my throat, heavy and immovable. I'd spent weeks crafting a version of myself to win him, but now, with his hand on my arm and his eyes locked on mine, I felt like a fraud about to be exposed. I'm not who you think I am. I blurted, the words raw and unsteady. Ethan's brow creased, but he didn't pull away. What do you mean? He asked, his voice calm but curious, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. I took a breath, the Seattle night cold against my skin, and let the truth spill out. I'm not a poet, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't cry at movies. I've been pretending to be sensitive, because I thought that's what you wanted. My hands shook, and I shoved them into my pockets. I grew up in a place where guys like me didn't get to be soft. I learned to hide, to act tough, but then I met you, and I wanted you to like me so bad I lied. Ethan's expression was unreadable, a mix of surprise and something deeper, maybe hurt. The silence stretched, each second a knife twisting in my gut. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. Why didn't you just tell me who you are? Because I didn't think you'd want me, I admitted, my voice cracking. You're this force, Ethan. You're out, proud, fearless. I'm just some kid from Oregon who's still figuring it out. I thought if I was more like you, maybe, I trailed off, unable to say the rest, maybe you'd love me. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair, and I braced for rejection. But instead, he laughed, a short, sharp sound that wasn't cruel but wasn't kind either. Lucas, you didn't have to lie to me, he said. I liked you because you seemed real. Quiet, yeah, but real. Now I don't even know what to think. My heart sank. I'm sorry, I whispered. I love you. The words slipped out, raw and unfiltered, and I froze, horrified. I hadn't meant to say it. Not like this, not now. Ethan's eyes widened, and for a moment, the world stopped. Pride, the party, the city, all gone. It was just us, and the truth I couldn't take back. Love? He repeated, his voice soft but heavy. Lucas, I barely know you. The real you, I mean. He wasn't angry, but his words cut deeper than anger ever could. I wanted to run, to disappear into the crowd, but my feet wouldn't move. I know, I said, my voice trembling. I messed up. I just wanted a chance. I looked down, unable to meet his gaze, the weight of my confession crushing me. I'd lost him, Not because I wasn't enough, but because I tried to be someone else. Ethan sighed, his breath visible in the chilly air. I need time to process this, he said. Let's just get through tonight, okay? He didn't wait for my answer, turning back toward the loft, his scarf trailing like a flag of surrender. I followed, numb, the music and laughter inside mocking my failure. The rest of the party was torture. Ethan stayed close but distant, talking to friends, laughing, while I hovered like a ghost. Zara kept glancing at me, her smirk gone, replaced by something like pity. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't, not without knowing if I'd ruined everything for good. As the night wound down, Ethan found me again, his expression softer but guarded. Come with me tomorrow, he said, almost like a challenge. There's a community center event, low-key, just some queer youth talking about their lives. No masks, Lucas. Just you. Can you do that? I nodded, my throat tight. I'll try, I said, and for the first time, I meant it. No lies, no pretense. Just me, scared and hopeful, willing to fight for a second chance. The next morning, I woke with a knot in my stomach. The community center was in a quiet part of town, a brick building with murals of rainbows and raised fists. Ethan was already there, sitting on a bench outside, his face unreadable. You came, he said, standing as I approached. I wasn't sure you would. I want to be honest, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. No more pretending. He studied me, then nodded, leading me inside. The room was small, filled with folding chairs and kids my age or younger, all sharing stories of struggle and triumph. I listened, my heart pounding, knowing Ethan was watching, waiting to see if I'd run again. When it was my turn, I stood, my hands shaking. I'm Lucas. I started, my voice wobbling. I'm bisexual, and I've spent a lot of time hiding it. Not just from the world, but from someone I care about. I glanced at Ethan, his eyes locked on me, and I kept going, spilling my truth, my small-town fears, my lies, my love. It wasn't poetry, but it was real, and for the first time, I felt like I was enough. The community center's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting a stark glow over the circle of chairs where I'd just bared my soul. My confession hung in the air, raw and exposed, and every eye in the room felt like a spotlight. Ethan sat across from me, his face a mask of calm, but his fingers tapped restlessly on his knee, a tell I'd learned meant he was thinking hard. The facilitator, a kind-faced woman named Marisol, nodded at me. Thank you, Lucas, she said. That took courage. The others murmured agreement, but I barely heard them. All I could see was Ethan, his gaze steady but unreadable. Had I gone too far, saying I cared about him in front of everyone? Or had I finally done something right by being honest? The session ended, and people milled around, grabbing coffee from a battered urn. I stayed in my chair, afraid to move, afraid to face him. Ethan approached slowly, his boots scuffing the linoleum. That was a lot, he said, sitting beside me. His voice was neutral, but his eyes were softer than last night, like the storm in them had passed. I meant it, I said, my voice low. All of it. I'm done lying. My hands twisted in my lap, and I forced myself to meet his gaze. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know who I am. He leaned back, exhaling. I'm not mad, Lucas. I'm just confused. You built this whole persona, and I bought it. I feel like I don't know you. His words stung, but they were fair. I'd spent weeks weaving a lie, and now I was asking him to trust the pieces left behind. I want you to know me, I said. The real me. I'm not a poet or some deep thinker. I'm just a guy who loves coffee, old vinyl records, and you. My face burned, but I didn't look away. I grew up in a place where I had to hide who I was. I thought I had to keep hiding to be enough for you. Ethan's lips twitched, not quite a smile. You didn't have to be anything but yourself, he said. I liked you because you listened, because you showed up. The poetry stuff was cute, but it wasn't why I kept texting you. My heart leapt, but before I could speak, he added, but trust is hard for me. I've been burned before. I need time. I nodded, swallowing the urge to beg for forgiveness. I'll wait, I said, as long as it takes. He looked at me, really looked, and for a moment, I thought he might say something more. But he just stood, offering a small smile. Let's get out of here, he said. I need air. We walked through Seattle's streets, the city quieter now, the pride energy fading into a Sunday calm. Ethan didn't talk much, but he didn't pull away either. We ended up at a park, sitting on a bench overlooking Lake Washington. The water glittered under the sun, and I felt a fragile hope stirring. "Tell me something real," Ethan said suddenly, turning to me. "No filters. Just you." I took a breath, digging deep. "I used to sneak out at night in high school," I said. "There was this field behind my house, full of fireflies. I'd sit there and imagine a life where I could be myself, where I could love who I wanted without being afraid. I didn't even know what that looked like until I met you." My voice shook, but I kept going. "You make me want to be brave, Ethan. Even if you never feel the same, you've already changed me." He was quiet for a long time, staring at the lake. Then he said, "That's the most real thing you've ever told me." His voice was soft, almost tender, and when he looked at me, there was a warmth I hadn't seen before. "I don't know what this is yet, Lucas, but I want to find out." My heart stuttered. It wasn't a promise, but it was a start. We sat there as the sun dipped lower, the silence between us no longer heavy, but full of possibility. For the first time, I felt like I was standing on solid ground, not a stage. I wasn't pretending anymore. I was just Lucas, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The next week was a tightrope walk, every moment with Ethan a mix of hope and fear. We met up daily, coffee shops, record stores, walks along the waterfront. But there was a new carefulness between us, like we were both learning to navigate the truth. I'd stopped pretending, stopped quoting poetry or faking tears, and it felt like shedding a heavy coat. But Ethan was still guarded, his smiles hesitant, his touches brief. I couldn't tell if he was warming to me or just testing the waters. One evening, he invited me to his apartment, a small studio in Capitol Hill cluttered with books and vinyl records. "I want you to see my world," he said, opening the door. The space smelled like him, cedar and ink, and I felt a pang of longing so sharp it hurt. He put on a Billie Holiday record, the scratchy notes filling the room, and we sat on his couch, knees almost touching. "Tell me about Oregon," he said, leaning back, his eyes curious but cautious. "The real stuff, not the field of fireflies." I laughed, nervous, but his smile put me at ease. So I told him about the small town where everyone knew your business, where my dad called feelings weak, where I'd learned to keep my head down. I told him about the first boy I'd crushed on, a football player who'd never know, and how I'd left for Seattle to escape the weight of it all. Ethan listened, his face softening. "That sounds lonely," he said when I finished. "I get why you hid." He paused, then added, "I hid too, for a long time. My family, they didn't take it well when I came out. I had to rebuild myself from scratch." I wanted to reach for his hand, but I didn't. "Instead," I said, "you make it look easy being yourself." He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping. "It's not. Every day's a fight. But it's worth it." He looked at me, his gaze piercing. "You're worth it too, Lucas. You just have to believe it." His words hit like a wave, washing away some of the shame I'd carried. For the first time, I felt seen, not as the poet I'd pretended to be, but as me, flaws and all. We talked late into the night, the record long finished, and when I left, he hugged me, his arms lingering a second longer than usual. "See you tomorrow," he said, and I walked home feeling lighter than I had in weeks. But the lightness didn't last. The next day, Zara texted me, her words sharp. "Heard you're not the poet Ethan thought. Be careful with him. He's been hurt before." The message stung, a reminder of the damage I'd done. I wanted to prove I was different, but doubt crept in. What if Ethan never fully trusted me? What if my lies had broken something irreparable? I decided to show him I was serious. I signed up for a writing workshop at the community center, not to fake poetry, but to learn, to find my own voice. When I told Ethan, his eyes lit up. "That's brave," he said, and I caught a glimpse of the warmth I'd been chasing. We started spending more time together, not just as friends, but as something undefined, something fragile and new. He'd tease me about my terrible taste in music, and I'd tease him about his obsession with scarves, and slowly, the distance between us shrank. One night, we ended up at a dive bar, the kind with sticky floors and cheap beer. Ethan was in a rare, playful mood, challenging me to a game of pool. I was terrible, But he laughed every time I missed a shot, his hand brushing mine as he handed me the cue. "You're hopeless," he said, grinning, and I wanted to freeze that moment, his smile brighter than the neon signs outside. As we left, the air cool and damp, he stopped under a streetlight, his face half-shadowed. "Lucas," he said, his voice serious, "I'm starting to trust you again. But I need to know you're all in. No more half-truths." My heart pounded, but I nodded. "I'm all in," I said, and I meant it. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the truth. I was just a boy in love, and I was ready to fight for it. The weeks that followed felt like a new chapter, one I hadn't dared hope for. Ethan and I were building something real, piece by piece, like a puzzle we were both afraid to finish. We didn't label it, no boyfriend or dating, but there was a shift. His texts came faster, his smiles lingered, and sometimes, when we walked together, his hand found mine, brief but electric. I threw myself into the writing workshop, scribbling messy, honest stories about my life, my fears, my hopes, my love for Ethan. It wasn't poetry, but it was mine, and when I shared a piece in class, the room clapped, and I felt a pride I'd never known. Ethan came to one of the readings, sitting in the back, his eyes locked on me. Afterward, he pulled me aside, his voice low. "That was you," he said. "The real you." I loved it. My chest swelled, and for a moment, I thought he might kiss me. But he just squeezed my shoulder, leaving me dizzy with want. Still, doubt lingered. Zara's warning echoed in my mind, and I caught Ethan's hesitance sometimes, a flicker of caution in his eyes. He'd been hurt before, by a guy who'd lied about who he was. He'd told me one night over tacos. "I thought he was my future," Ethan said, his voice tight. "Then I found out he was hiding a whole life, girlfriend, job, everything. I swore I'd never be that guy, but the shadow of my own lies loomed large." One rainy afternoon, we ended up at Retro Threads again, the place where it all began. Ethan was hunting for a jacket for an open mic he was hosting. "You're coming, right?" he asked, holding up a velvet blazer. I nodded, my stomach twisting. Open mics still made me nervous, reminding me of the poet I'd pretended to be. But I wanted to support him, to show I was all in. In the fitting room, the same cramped space where I'd nearly unraveled weeks ago, Ethan tried on the blazer, turning to check his reflection. "What do you think?" he asked, catching my eye in the mirror. I wanted to say he looked perfect, that I'd never wanted anyone more. But instead, I said, "It's you." He smiled, and before I could think, he stepped closer, his hand brushing my cheek. "Lucas," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm scared too, you know." My breath caught. He'd never admitted that before. "I want this, us, but I need to know you're not going to run when it gets hard." "I'm not running," I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. "I love you, Ethan. I'm here." His eyes searched mine, and then, slowly, he leaned in. His lips met mine, soft and tentative, like he was testing the truth of my words. The kiss was brief, but it set my world on fire, every nerve alight with him. We didn't talk about it after, just paid for the blazer and stepped into the rain, our hands brushing as we walked. But something had shifted, a door opening that I wasn't sure would ever close. That night, at the open mic, I watched Ethan perform, his words sharp and beautiful, and I knew I'd do anything to keep him. But the next day, trouble came. Zara called me, her voice tense. "Ethan's freaking out," she said. "Someone told him you were still hiding stuff. Something about a guy in Oregon." My blood ran cold. There was no guy in Oregon, just rumors from my hometown, old classmates who'd seen me with Ethan on social media and assumed the worst. But to Ethan, with his history of betrayal, it was a landmine. I found him at the cafe, his face closed off, his coffee untouched. "Is it true?" he asked, not looking at me. "Were you with someone else back home?" I shook my head, explaining the rumors, the small-town gossip that had followed me. "I swear, Ethan, it's just me. You're the only one." He wanted to believe me. I could see it in his eyes, but trust was fragile, and I'd already broken it once. "I need space," he said finally, standing. "Just give me a few days." I nodded, my heart sinking, and watched him walk away, the rain blurring him into a ghost. 3 days without Ethan felt like a lifetime, each hour heavy with the fear I'd lost him for good. I kept busy. Work, the writing workshop, long walks through Seattle's drizzle. But my mind was a loop of his face, his voice, that kiss. I wanted to text him, to beg, but he'd asked for space, and I owed him that much. So I waited, my heart a bruise that ached with every beat. On the 4th day, he texted, "Meet me at the lake. 7 p.m. No explanation, just those words, and I clung to them like a lifeline. When I arrived, the sun was setting, painting Lake Washington in shades of gold and pink. Ethan was on the same bench where we'd talked weeks ago, his scarf loose around his neck, his expression unreadable. "I've been thinking," he said as I sat, his voice steady but quiet. "About you, about us. I talked to Zara, did some digging. The Oregon thing, it's nothing, right?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Just gossip," I said. "I swear." He exhaled, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "I believe you," he said. "But it scared me, Lucas. I've been through too much to get hurt again." "I know," I said, my voice raw. "I hate that I made you doubt me. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust." He looked at me, his eyes searching, and I saw the battle there. Fear versus hope, past versus present. "I don't want to lose you," I added, the words spilling out. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Ethan's lips curved, a small, real smile. "You're a lot, Lucas Harper," he said, but there was warmth in his voice. "But you're honest now, and that's what I needed." He reached for my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine, and my heart stuttered. "I'm not saying it's easy," he went on, "but I want to try. With you. The real you." I laughed, relief flooding me. "The real me's kind of a mess," I said. "But he's all yours." Ethan's smile widened, and he leaned in, kissing me again. This time deeper, surer, like he was claiming something we'd both fought for. The lake shimmered behind us, the city alive with possibility, and I felt like I was finally home. We didn't fix everything that night. Trust was a slow build, and we had work to do. Talks about boundaries, fears, dreams. But we did it together, step by step. I kept writing, finding my voice, and Ethan kept performing, his poetry sharper for the truth we shared. We went to Pride again the next year, not as friends or undefined somethings, but as partners, our hands clasped, our hearts open. Looking back, I'd lied because I thought I had to, thought love meant being someone else. But Ethan taught me that love was about being seen, flaws, fears, and all, and choosing each other anyway. I wasn't a poet, but I'd found my story, and it was us, messy and real, under Seattle's endless rain.